Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is August 10th, 2021, and today's guest is Heath Cisco. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Blasey, and today's episode is 173. And today's guest is Heath Cisco from Ohio. This is a guest that I've been wanting to get on for a long time. Heath he's a very good whitetail hunter. He's very knowledgeable, and he's a legend. I honestly, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Let's just put it that way. He does things at a very high level, and he's a consistent killer on great mature deer, and I cannot wait to pick his brain. Before I do get into this, I do want to preempt that I think Heath was having some issues with his Wi-Fi, so his audio, it kind of lags a little bit. I am very sorry that it happened this way. It's not Heath's fault at all. He did not know that it was going on. I kind of bring it up during the podcast, and I thought it'd pan itself out. I had good service. He had good service, but he was connected to Wi-Fi, and I've had this issue before. But it does lag a little bit. I think it works itself out every once in a while. You can hear the information. It might just get annoying. I hope it doesn't, because this is a great conversation. Heath is very knowledgeable, like I said, and I cannot wait to have him on again. We cover a lot of stuff in this podcast, and we're going to do another one shortly and cover a lot more, because we didn't even get to half of what I wanted to talk about. But we do talk about scent control, what he does. We talk about his October approach, scouting in season, like how he approaches October when he gets boots on the ground. He likes to go out and kind of not necessarily bump deer, but if he bumps deer, he wants to see what buck he bumps, because he's going to go back in the next morning and he's going to try to kill him in that bed. It's pretty cool. We get into a lot of cool stuff, but I wanted to preempt the audio. Bear with it, please. There's great information in this. I apologize, but I'm just going to preempt that, and just so you guys are aware. So thank you guys, everybody out there, for all the support and all the downloads. Please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and just do a written review. That'd be greatly appreciated. So with that being said, I'm going to get over this interview with Heath, and hopefully you guys have a good rest of your week. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast, and today's guest is Heath Cisco from the Buckeye State. It hurts me to say that, Heath, that you're from the Buckeye State, because I'm in Wolverine country. I'm a big Wolverine guy, but it hurts me to say that. But I respect the heck out of you, and so I just have to talk to you, even though you're a Buckeye fan.
Well, I think you're going to hate me for a good while because we just keep stacking them up with recruiting rankings, and I don't know. Coach Day's got a thing going up there, and we'll just see what happens. I love the competition from Michigan. I love the game. I just I want it to come down to the wire every time. And, hopefully we can continue that. So
and as much as it hurts me to say, I just dislike Ohio State. The thing is, they have a dynasty. It is whatever they're doing, it's just they're elite. I mean, you've got Alabama, you got Ohio State, you got Clemson, and then you can throw Oklahoma in that category. But there's a couple teams that are just above and beyond everybody, and it's crazy how they can do that year in and year out.
It is, but Michigan was like that back when Bo Schembechler and then
Lloyd Carr.
Lloyd Carr.
Yep.
And then they struggled since then a little bit, but hopefully they can get back up there, because the only game that I'm interested in watching all year long is the Ohio State-Michigan game.
Amen, man. I hope so too. Ohio State's had Michigan's number for a good while now, and it's for my sanity and all my friends' sanity and Michigan alone, I just want them to squeak one out.
Sure,
no more blowouts. I just want I want a W. I'm ready for one. So
Yeah, Ohio State's definitely had their number, and Michigan's had some good teams.
Yeah,
and Ohio State at times had a good team, but they just weren't hitting on all cylinders. And every time when they come up to Michigan, they hit it out of the park.
It is. So, it's crazy. I'll be interested to see how this year goes. I don't have high expectations for Michigan football, but I've had my priorities have been other places this summer and spring, sure. And so I'm just gonna show up and see what happens when the season starts. So we'll see.
Yeah, I just hope the government doesn't get crazy and shut it down where we can't even enjoy sports. So
man, that'd be a bad deal. Bad deal. Well, hey, we didn't start this podcast to start talking sports, even though I love it. But today, like I said, I got Heath Cisco on today. If nobody knows who you are, Heath, they've been living under a rock for a long time. You are, in my eyes, a legend in the whitetail woods, and I'm super glad that I could get you on here, and I'm ready to pick your brain, honestly.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I don't consider myself a legend. I've just been, I guess, if a legend's been grinding for numerous years, well, then that would be me, because I've been hunting for a long time. So
yes, you have, and you've killed some very impressive deer, and you do it at a consistent level, which is awesome. And in today's podcast, I was talking to you a little bit in the pre-call, and my questions are kind of all over the map, so all the listeners out there, just bear with me. This is going to be all great info, but there might be some hard transitions just because selfishly, I want to know a lot of this stuff, and I think a lot of people will take something from it. So if you're ready, man, I'm ready. I'm going to hit you with a couple questions here.
Yep, shoot. I'm good.
Good. So you like to hunt fronts, cold fronts, weather changes. I think a lot of hunters out there, they like to hunt fronts as well. I mean, it's one of those things that gets the deer up and moving. Now, I've watched your stuff and listened to a lot of podcasts that you've done for a long time, and you talk about fronts, but you also talk about it doesn't have to be like a cold front. It just has to be a weather switch, like a big shift, kind of. And the reason why I want to ask this question is because I had this instance in Missouri a couple years ago, and I want to pick your brain about it because it was the exact opposite of a cold front. It was really cold, and it went from like 20 to 28 degrees to like 60 degrees in a day, and the deer just, boom, they are moving, like crazy. Have you witnessed that a lot too, from cold to warm, or has it always been like a cold front coming in is just better?
Well, when you mentioned cold front, I mean, that's what everybody wants to talk about, a cold front. But it's, in my opinion, it is nice when you do have colder weather come in to get the deer moving. But in my opinion, it's weather change. If you get a stagnant time period, even with cold weather, let's say the average temperature is, 50 degrees, and you got, 40 degrees for a week, let's say. It's great in the beginning, and then it starts getting stagnant as you go 3 to 4 to 5 days into it. But when you have a switch, whether it is a increase in temperature or a decrease in temperature, and a lot of times that increase in temperature comes with a wind change. Let's say you got a cold front moving through and you get a northerly wind for like 3 or 4 or 5 days. Well, it starts getting stagnant. And when that weather switches, and let's say warm weather comes in and you got a south wind that comes out, I've had some of my best luck on the first south wind after a northern front. So you have a front that comes through, or just normal weather that's out of the north. But then when that wind switches, the deer like changes in weather, changes in wind, and it sets you up for different situations. And that way, if you're hunting a northern wind, well, then it opens the door to all kinds of different options with a south wind.
Okay. I got some, I do have good service or bad service, or I've got some lag in your phone. I was just curious what your service is like.
It seems pretty, mine seems pretty good.
Okay. It might be on my end. I've got some good service too. It's just lagging a little bit. Let's see if it will work its way out maybe. So you talk about that first south wind after a cold front, which Mark Drury talks a lot about that as well. And when did it like click for you that this is like a thing, like this works, like this is for you? Because there's a lot of information out there, a lot of podcasts. What I say might not work for you, and what you say might not work for me. So you kind of got to like take the take the information and use it as you will. So like, when did that click for you? And it was like, man, this is something that really I'm onto.
So I started looking at deer activity on my stand sites, different places I hunt, different times I hunt, and see when the activity peaked and when it fell off, and I just wasn't having any luck.
Yep.
And then when I would start seeing really good bucks, and it never failed after a northerly front that came through when it switched over to the south that first morning that it switched. I've set up and had some great luck, and I started I killed several deer right on the first south wind after a north. And then you just start thinking about it, and you start looking at your logs, and it just adds up. And then you hear somebody like Mark Drury talk about it. It's like, well, yeah, I knew that, but I never really talked about it, and I never really just said, oh, I'm just hunting a south wind after a northerly front. I don't think that way. I hunt as much as I can.
Right.
But you start putting all this stuff together, and it's just like, well, this is weird because I've had this and this happen on this weather change. And it's the same way, like you said, changing from, everybody talks about cold fronts, but if you go from cooler temperature and then it switches to a warmer temperature, it's that change in weather that seems like it triggers the movement.
Yep. And you talked about, if you have an average temp of like 50 degrees, and let's say it falls to, let's just say 35 degrees, when is the sweet spot? Is it like as it's changing, or is it like 2 or 3 days while it's at 35? Because then, you said it'll stay stagnant. It might stay at 35 for a week. So like when have you figured out is that sweet spot of like, I need to be sitting these 3 days or whatever it might be?
Sure. Well, it all depends on are you talking early season October, mid-season November, December, or late season January? So that all depends on what temperature level it is. If it's early season and you have a really shock of cold temperature coming in, it may not be very good. But if you have, let's say, a 15-degree drop, it seems like it kicks the deer in. It's usually a couple days, and then it starts, your movement starts fading off, it seems like. And then when you have another switch, whether it gets back warm again, you may have a little bit of good movement in that morning, and then it goes back to being stagnant until the next weather change.
Okay, I got you. And it's kind of, if you pictured like a graph almost, I almost feel like it's, it's like a big dip. You know what I mean? It's like you have this consistent, maybe gradual graph, and that just like falls right off, and it's like a ditch almost. It's just like, okay, those are times I need to be sitting. I need to be, thinking, looking ahead, and you're probably looking ahead at the weather and everything. It's like, okay, Thursday, I got to be there, kind of thing, right?
Yes. And if I'm looking at it, let's say an out-of-state hunt, if I get a week's time period and all I have is north winds, I hate it.
Really?
Because I want to change. I want to get a couple days north, then a couple days south, and then I wouldn't even mind having a west or back to north again. You know what I mean? Flip-flop back and forth. I don't really care for easterly winds. Southeast isn't bad, but I don't like dead east. And maybe it's just in my mind, but I was a fisherman too. I used to fish a lot, and they always say east the least,
Okay.
And I've seen that in fishing. Now, in deer hunting, I can't say I've seen that as much, but I like the change. And usually it's a couple days of good hunting, and then it seems like it kind of gets stagnant again, and when you have that weather switch, it flips again. And like when a front's actually coming through that brings through a rainstorm or whatever, I love rainstorms because, like this year, and last year as well, the two bigger deer I killed, was setting up my stands before a rainstorm. And then that rainstorm come through with a northerly front. And then, year before last, it came through with a northerly front and changed the wind from a south to a north. And I got in there the next morning of that front because it blew in a bunch of snow and I killed my buck. This year was a direct opposite. I had northerly winds and a rain moved in. And then like 2 days later, it was going to be a south. So I set my stand for a south because that's just what that's what I needed for that buck to be bedded in that certain point or wanting to bed in that area. And that's what I did. I went in there on the first morning after the south come in that night and killed it the next morning.
Wow. That's crazy. It's cool to see like trends like that and hear from guys like, you like rainy days. You like the kind of overcast, I'm guessing. My biggest buck that I ever killed in Michigan here was right after a rain all day. Like, it rained all night into the morning, stopped about midday, but it was, it kind of cleared up, but it was like that overcast kind of feel. And early October, is October 1st, opening night, and this buck came in with the wind to his back the whole way. And I was sitting in kind of a transition where I was about probably 50 yards off destination food, like in the thick cover where it was a hard edge, where oaks met a pine trees, like a pine thicket, and then the pine thicket was like the buffer to the destination food, and I was sitting right on the edge. It was a northeast wind, and he came from straight east, so he was kind of cutting the wind in a way, but I felt, honestly, right when he showed up underneath me, I had the feeling in my head, like, what the hell is this? Why did he come from there?
Sure.
And that's like one of those questions I have. Like, do you have a lot of bucks that come in from with the wind to their back? Like, and if so, like, what do you take that as? Like, what does that mean?
So I do in certain situations, and a lot of times in November, I get them, quartering downwind. Because a lot of times that's just what they travel, because they could cover as much territory, scent check as much area, and then plus they're able to, check for predators kind of behind them, trailing them or whatever.
Sure.
But like you was talking about the weather changes and rain and stuff like that, I don't have as good a luck as the front is coming in as I do when the front is moving out. If that makes sense. So like the first bluebird sky day after a storm front that moves through, those are awesome. And used to, when I hunted a long time ago, I always wanted, overcast days with cloud cover and stuff. And I always thought the deer would think it was kind of dark and they would move more. But what I found over the years is that's completely opposite. The deer are like humans in a lot of ways. When it's overcast, you feel kind of droggy and just kind of lazy or whatever. And I think the deer do the same. But, when the sun comes out, everybody's out in their yard messing around doing stuff outside. And the deer seem to feel kind of the same way. When it's sunny and stuff, they feel better and they get up and they move more.
Yep. Yeah,
and
for
then
sure.
When a rain, I also found out with rains, if you're going to hunt after the rain quits, what I found out is you need to be in your stand while it's still raining. And then as soon as that rain quits, it seems like the woods bust loose.
Really?
Yes. So what I've tried to do is I've got my butt burnt several times because I waited till it stopped raining, and then I'm going into my setup or whatever and end up bumping. You need to be in your stand, in my opinion, right before the rain quits. If you're hunting, let's say in the evening, and it's supposed to quit raining around 2 o'clock, you need to be in your stand about 1:30. And then play it, suffer through the rain, and then as soon as it quits raining and that sun pops out, the woods will come alive.
Actually, now that I think of it, that makes total sense for something that I was doing some research on a couple years ago. And Casey and I were in Missouri. We had a tornado come through. A tornado touched down. We were going to the stand. We literally watched a tornado touch down. And it got so bad, and then the weather shifted. Like, we sat it out in the truck. It was pouring bad. And we, like, right when it cleared up, we literally ran right to the stand, and we were covered up in deer. And after that night, he shot a good buck that night. And after that, I was like, I kind of wanted to know more about like, why did the deer move? Well, I'd have to go back and kind of look at my research that I wrote down, because I don't know the exact like words that it was, but it was talking about how when the earth like kind of wakes up after like a rain in a way, it opens the deer's like a deer's nose glands, like the nose, like it almost like it makes everything more vibrant to them, if that makes sense. And it kind of gets it just makes the deer want to get up and move. Like that's the dumbed down version, but that's kind of what it is. It does something with their nose and their glands in their nose and everything. It kind of opens them up, and they can smell better, they feel better, and they're vibrant, and they go. Like, that's literally what it was. And I'm like, that is crazy. That is like good knowledge though,
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they don't want to lay around for an hour after it quits raining. They're up on their feet as soon as it stops.
Yeah.
And you need to be there to to catch that movement.
Yep. Now, if you see, let's say you have like some east winds, and then you see a south wind coming, is that the same as like, I need to get out there and hunt that south wind, but it's not necessarily after a front?
Yeah, I will, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be a front change in wind direction. A front is, more defined, I guess you could say.
Right.
But any change in wind direction, because, you set up on a farm. Let's say you have access to one farm, or maybe a couple farms even. Well, you got certain places you can hunt on a south wind, certain places you can hunt on the west, certain places you can hunt on the north, and not a lot of them you can hunt on any of the winds. So if you get in certain situations, maybe you'll find that. So I like to be able to, manipulate hunting spots with different winds. If I went into a farm in 17, I was hunting a giant non-typical, and this farm sets up perfect for southerly winds, whether it's south, southwest, southeast. And I get out there for my 10-day hunt, and we had almost all north winds. And I was just so upset.
Yeah.
But and what I should have done, looking back on it, because you always learn from your failures, is I should have just got aggressive and jumped in there and tried to play the thermals a little bit more instead of sitting back and just praying for a southerly wind.
Yep.
And I kind of blew some opportunities on that hunt on just a magnificent deer, and those are the ones you wish you had back.
Right. Yeah, and it's good to hear you say something like the wind, like you want more wind changes. That's a light bulb moment to me. That's something I've never really read and somebody's never told me. Like that's something I don't really look at. I just look at, okay, the wind is southwest. Well, it's not good for the stand that I want to go into. Okay, so I cross that off. But like, I like, what you're saying, kind of manipulate and maybe that's time for you to get a little more aggressive, and make a move. If it's the right time. I like that.
Yeah, you can come at them from so many different directions.
Yeah.
For instance, the buck I killed this past year in Illinois, on a south wind, I knew where he bedded. On a north wind, I wasn't 100% sure. So on a north wind, I was going in there and trying to, locate him and see where he was at, and I could never lock it down. But on a south wind, I knew exactly where he was bedded. And once I determined that, it was just waiting on that right wind. Now, don't get me wrong, you come in November, and he come in following a doe, so, that you get mid-November or any time in November, anything could happen. But,
sure.
But he bedded on that little point, and it was only on a south wind.
Wow.
So if it was a north wind the whole time, I would have been back there, and I would have probably ended up bumping into him. He would have caught on me. Who knows what could have happened, because it was in bigger timber. And on a south wind, he was over in a less timbered area that was just kind of brushy, and he had one good point that he was bedding on. So,
okay.
And so that's why I don't like just one wind direction. I want it to, if I got a week's hunt and if it changes 3 or 4 times, I'm great. But if it changes once, then it's tough.
And that might even be good information too, if you have like some vacation that you're trying to figure out when you're going. If you go into like a week where you're going to travel for, your rutcation or whatever it might be, and if you got straight winds, like north winds all week, you might want to rethink about, do you really want to go that time? Is that something that you would do?
It depends on what farm I'm hunting. If it sets up for a north wind and I can manipulate most of the spots on the north wind, maybe not. But if it's a farm that I can come at it from different angles, then yeah, I'd rather have it where it breaks up. And it all depends on the time of year.
Mm-hmm.
If it is the last week of October, well, I'll probably go. If it is the first week of November, well, I'll probably go. But if it's mid-October, no, I probably wouldn't. I would hold off a week.
Yep.
Or if it's late in November, yeah, I'd probably hold off.
Okay. You're talking about the buck that you shot in Illinois last year. I'm going to transition to that a little bit. You said you knew where he was bedding on a south wind. Now, did you physically know he was bedding there because you saw him with your eyes, or was it recon that you had with like trail cams or something like that? Like, how did you know he was there and was using it on a south wind?
So, Justin Hollingsworth.
Yep.
You guys are pretty good friends.
Yep.
He hunted it the last week of October. It was a buck we knew about for 3 years. He hunted it the last week of October, and for whatever reason, that buck was not showing his face in daylight. But Justin ended up jumping him jumping him on a scouting mission, jumped him out of his bed.
Okay.
And Justin's like, yeah, I jumped him in this spot. And, so he kind of set up his stand and tried to manipulate that spot. And plus, we was getting a lot of north winds, so he was hunting him in this other bedding spot as well. And it never worked out for him. And he never did see the buck during daylight because the buck just was not moving far enough out of his bed for Justin to see. So then I used that information. Justin went to Andres to hunt in Iowa. So I used that, and then I was coming back out in November, and I planned on coming out on the 5th, but the temperatures went through the roof. So I held off till I think I got out there on the 8th and scouted a day or so and started hunting. So basically, I knew general area where I thought he was bedding or where we thought he was staying on a north wind, and I wasn't 100% sure whether Justin just jumped him out of a spot that he just happened to be in that day,
right,
or was this a spot that he wanted to stay in. And I went in. I hunted the south side of the farm for a few days. No luck with the northerly wind, and I knew the wind was going to. It was a front coming through, and I knew the wind was going to change and come out of the south. So I went up there and scouted. I actually seen him cutting into that bedding area one morning, and I went up there and scouted, and I found this right where Justin jumped him. There was 3 beds, and they were big beds, and you can tell where he'd just been wallering them out.
No kidding.
And yeah, and I knew right then. I thought this is where he's staying at on the south wind, and I hung a stand, and it was going to rain that night, and I thought, it's going to be a couple days before I get that south wind, but it's going to wash my scent away. He won't have a clue, and that's what happened. I went back in there the next morning. Now, like I said, it's November 16th. He come through following a doe very slowly, and I was able to take him at 15 yards. But, was he coming back in there to bed? Probably not, but that's where he wanted to hang. He wanted to hang in that area, and I feel that he plucked that doe out of the herd and kind of shoved her over into his domain.
Yep.
And they were going to spend a day in there. So
that's crazy. So do you think his 3 beds were just different wind-specific beds right there?
They could have been. I mean, they was all within 10 yards apart.
Okay.
I just think a lot of times, I don't know, that maybe they want to change beds a little bit. I see some that just have one big bed, and you can tell where they've laid many different directions.
Sure.
And then on this knoll, I guess he could have handled it to where, let's say the wind was coming out of the southeast instead of just the dead south, or the southwest instead of the dead south.
Okay.
He could have. He was on a little knoll where he could really any south wind is set up perfect for him.
I gotcha. It's I pulled a trail cam a couple years ago in Michigan, and it was a spot where I just let a camera marinate. Pulled a camera, and I had a buck come into this camera. I can't remember what day it was. It was during season. He bedded down like mid-morning. He bedded there for, I had pictures of him for 6 hours. Okay, and it was like a time lapse of pictures. And he got up after 6 hours. You could see that he stretched out. He had like a big arch in his back, and he was like stretching out, kind of cleaning himself off. In the next set of pictures, he was about 8 yards away, facing a different direction. So light bulb went off in my head, and I went to Weather Underground, and I went back to that day and kind of did like, it shows you like what times of the day the winter's doing. There was a frickin' wind shift at that time.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing. And, but all they're doing is sitting there catching that wind. They wet their nose,
yes,
and feel it. And, that's just amazing. And that's just what they do to survive.
It's unbelievable.
And for a normal person to think that that's what they do, and if they don't understand the wind, they're outclassed, and they just can't imagine what they're up against.
Yeah, and this was a young deer. This was a 2.5-year-old deer, and he was just like probably 100-inch 8-pointer, a 2-inch or 2.5-year-old deer. But and then when he situated, he bedded back down for I want to say it was like 3 more hours. Okay, he literally bedded all day in this 10-yard little swath, and he got up a half hour before day or dark and kind of started wandering off. It was just crazy to see that day how that deer spent his day and how like methodical he was with it. It was unbelievable. It taught me so much in one trail cam pull, and I'm like, wow, that's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. And, you know, people want to talk about deer being nocturnal or just I'm not having any luck. Well, you know, they're moving, but, you know, take a 4 or 5-year-old deer. He probably isn't getting 50 yards away from that bed.
No.
You know, unless certain weather conditions or actual, you know, moon transit times actually get them up and make them more eager to move farther. So,
yeah. You know, and it's the whole nocturnal thing. I'm not a biologist, know nothing. Like, just from my experiences, I just don't think deer go nocturnal. That's just my opinion. I think they have a shift, obviously. But I just don't. The deer are somewhere. You know, like this deer, for instance, bedded down for like, you know, about 10 hours in the daylight. You know, he was just in the thick stuff. But like you said, those deer are smart. They're just not getting up. You know, is that kind of the same instant or same scenarios you've kind of had, like, or opinion, or what's your opinion on nocturnal deer?
No, that's completely. Well, my opinion's changed over the years, of course, because of my history in hunting and what I've seen and what I've found. But yeah, you're spot on because those deer are going to move. There's no such thing as a nocturnal deer. That deer is up at certain times of the day, standing, feeding. Now, it may not be out of a 15-yard circle around his bed, but he is up. So is the definition of a nocturnal deer one that lays in his bed with his head on the ground from daylight to dark? If that's the case, then there's no such thing.
Right.
I mean, I hunted a buck. This has probably been about 18 years ago. It was in late season. I hunted him in the morning, never seen him. I hunted him in the evening, never seen him. But I happened to get in there early one day around 2 o'clock, and I was looking out across this brush field, and he was out there feeding. And almost every day to the dot at like 2:35, he was standing up feeding. And he didn't feed within 20 yards of his bed, and he would bed back down and be there till after dark.
No kidding.
So was that deer nocturnal? No, he was up feeding. He was just at 2:35 in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah.
So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, you know, and I had an instance last year too here in my family farm in Michigan. I talked about it on a couple podcasts ago about a buck, and this was a 2.5-year-old deer again, 100-inch 8-pointer, and I went in. It was October 2nd, evening sit. I was in an inside corner of a destination field, but I was probably 100 yards off that inside corner, sitting between. It was a transition zone between bedding, and I knew it was thick bedding. I mean, we just know I just didn't want to get too close to the bedding. I was just over. Well, I had this deer come out, and I mean, it was closing time. It was like, I saw him come over the hill, and he is moseying. He is like just Eeyore, just like, I'll get there when I get there kind of thing. But this deer had a methodical way of moving. Like, he was hitting every acorn tree. You know, his plan was to go by me when it got dark to get out to the destination food. But I feel like if I would have pushed in about 80 more yards, and if he was a shooter, I think I would have been right on that cusp where I would have been, you know, I would have killed him. If I wasn't going to kill the deer, but it was just like 80 yards was about the difference, you know. But I felt like that 80 yards, I'd be fucking myself, you know. Like I would have probably, he could have been just bedded over just that knoll, and I was just far enough off with a good wind. He didn't hear me or smell me or see me, you know, hanging my stand, getting in. But it was just like 80 yards was that difference, you know, and that's just that's just so fascinating about whitetails to me. It's like you learn so much when you just sit back and you're like, man.
Yes,
you know,
and you got to get close to kill them things. You need to be within a certain distance. Depends on what the terrain and the openness and stuff will allow you. You need to be in that bubble that they're going to hit before it gets dark. Yep. And a lot of times that's a difficult task to do. The buck I killed this past year, like I was talking about in Illinois, there was a funnel that was probably within 100 yards where this thing was bedded, and it was a corner of a fence. It was such a great funnel, and I hunted that funnel a couple times and seen numerous different bucks, but never did catch that buck come through there. And I put a trail camera on it, and I got him coming through there a couple times after dark. But I'm like, you know, if I hunted like I used to hunt 15 years ago, I would have hunted that rough funnel till I lived and died by it.
Yeah.
And it would have never worked. I moved 80 to 100 yards, and I killed the buck on the first set that I hunted in there.
Yeah.
So it just shows you, you got to be right on top of them, and you got to scout and put yourself in those positions. and be mobile to change positions and not just stick to one tree and just wait it out. You may be successful. It depends on how many good bucks you got in that area. But if you want to be consistently killing deer every year, you got to get on them and you got to get in tight.
Yep. The question I'm going to ask here is going to be kind of a broad situation, but like, what's your theory on like an edge? A hard edge. Let's say it's where like an oak, like an oak ridge, maybe like a kind of a more mature ridge with some oaks and maples and everything in it, where it hits like a cedar thicket, like it's got cedar trees in it, but it's thick bedding. Are those bucks? Are they, in your opinion, in your instances, like what you've experienced, are those bucks bedding more on like right on that edge, or are they in the thick stuff a little bit farther?
What I've seen, deer love traveling edges.
Yep.
They're edge creatures, and I think Ben Risen coined it best with his whitetail edge. I mean, it's a perfect saying because they love edges. But it depends. In what I've seen, it depends on the terrain features. Let's say if you got the wind coming out of that thicket, they like to be bedded on the edge, looking out through the open. It depends on it depends on if it's dropping over a hill or whatever.
Sure.
I have found them in the middle of that stuff, but a lot of times you find them just on the edge, 15 to 20 yards in.
Okay.
They like to be able to be looking out into the open and bound back through the brush.
Yep.
But it all depends on the terrain, how it lays. Is there a knoll there? Which way the wind comes across that thicket? I've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
But I love hunting edges, like you just described. Though.
Yep. Do you try to get like right on the edge, like you're sitting, your body's being split basically by the edge of like thick to more mature timber or whatever it might be?
Of course, the sign will dictate it, but yes. I mean, that's a lot of times where you find the sign.
Okay.
And especially if you can find where they're coming out of that thicket, and let's say if it's early season, you got some white oaks out through there or flat or something like that. You got to set on the downwind side, maybe get over next to a ditch or something where they're cutting through. Mm-hmm. It all just depends. I mean, it's hard to lay out a scenario and say, well, this is what I would do unless you looked at the terrain features and seen what kind of sign was here or there,
Yep. Yeah, that totally makes sense. We're in August now, so we're getting close to this season. You're down in Ohio, so your guys' season opens last weekend of September this year, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so when you're getting in, let's say you're getting ready to hunt, September's here or August, whatever it might time be. Do you have, I know you're doing a lot of scouting from a distance, checking your cameras, but like, how are you getting boots on the ground, like right before season to kind of try to find that most concentrated sign? Or are you kind of throwing a sit, more of like a passive sit just to kind of see where things are moving and then moving in? Or like, how's your strategy there?
So what I like to do, and I've done it both ways. So I keep trying to get better every year. So what I like to do, what I have done before is just go in and throw a set and then kind of go off of it.
Yeah.
But I've failed a lot of times because, man, if I was just one ridge over from my scouting, I would have been in the chips.
Right.
At least get a better idea where I'm at and where I need to move to. So what I do now is, a lot of signs laid down the last couple of weeks of September. And what I like doing is going in about 2 weeks before season opens. If I plan on hunting some of the opener, I'll go in about 2 weeks before season opens, and I'll just tear the place apart. I know where all the white oaks are. I know where the red oaks are. I first go to the white oak patches and see if there's big timber to see if the white oaks are dropping and which trees, and you can tell by the sign. I mean, they'll lay it out for you. There'll be a scrape, there'll be a rub, there'll be droppings. You'll see the acorns on the ground. Or if there's like, a bean field that was planted late that's still green. I'll check the leaves and see if they're real tough. If they turn to like sandpaper, well, I'll know the deer won't normally be coming to it. They'll be hitting acorns if the acorns are dropping.
Right.
And just let the sign tell me what's happening 2 weeks ahead of time. Then I'll go ahead and pick me out a couple spots. And then it'll all just depend on what way the wind is. And then that's when I'll start.
Yep.
I'll go in there. I'll hunt it the first morning. Or if it's just an evening spot, maybe I'll go to another spot in the morning. run a hunt, and then I'll just roll from it. And what I see, do I need to move? Do I get down and scout? And you always got to tiptoe around to see what's going on because things change so much. This tree could be done dropping, and the next finger over or the next flat over could be producing them. And you just got to roll with them and move to them.
Yep. What's your thoughts on bumping deer at that time? Are you afraid of kicking deer at that time, or is it just one of those things, if it happens, it happens, I got to know what's going on kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, usually I've scouted the area in the spring. Well, I say spring, but January, February time frame, and I kind of got an idea on where they're normally going to be bedded. And so I try to avoid those places in the beginning, and I try to hunt the outskirts. And like now, I've got a couple bucks that I've known from last year. I think where they were bedded. I didn't actually jump them out of. I think I know where they're bedded. There's an acorn flat, out from that, 100 yards or so that has several white oaks. Well, first thing I'm going to do 2 weeks before season is go scout that acorn flat and see what acorns are producing, if acorn trees are producing. Maybe none of them are. They have that a lot. And then if that's the case, then where's the sign at? Where are they moving to? Where's their water source? I should have all that, known, and I just got to go check it. Okay, do I go to this water hole because I'm hunting big timber and there's a bunch of tracks in it? And then that'll lead me into where I go next. But yeah, I try to avoid it. But when it gets about the 15th of October, something like that, I'll push my luck and try to get the wind in my face, and then come into the bed and check it out and see if I can jump one out of it, and then see if they are actually using that bed. Because I don't want to be wasting my time on a deer. Maybe I'm getting trail camera pictures of him and I see he's coming from this spot. Maybe I'm not. I need to go in there and verify it so my confidence will be high.
Sure.
Maybe I'll see something that I need to change up in my approach. Maybe he's picking me out when I'm walking in, that kind of deal.
Yep. God, you got me fired up right now, man. All I want to do is just go scout right now.
Well, used to, I didn't scout. Back in the early 2000s, I would scout in the spring. I would pick out all my trees. I would clean my trees out, and I wouldn't even hang stands. I would just take a stand in with me because I hunted places where a lot of other people hunted,
Yep.
And I didn't want nobody to see my setups,
right?
Because they'd already seen my vehicle, know where I was hunting. So I would do that. But what I found is I found all these great rut funnels, and I was what they call a rut hunter, I guess you could say. And then I would go set these spots, but I wouldn't even check them out first to see if the deer used them heavy. So I would go in and waste a hunt in this great funnel that's in softwoods. And when 2 ridges over, the acorns are everywhere, and there's another funnel over there that the deer are just pounding.
Yep.
So you got to scout to see what's happening. If you scout, and Andre DeQuisto taught me this, scout more than you hunt. Scout to set yourself up and then give it one good go and lay it all out on the line. If that doesn't work, scout and find your other best spot and give it a go.
Yep.
Instead of just picking a spot here and thinking it's going to be good from the year-old sign.
Yep.
You can't do that and be successful.
Yeah, and to hear you say that, I kind of think about like what are my weaknesses. I think my biggest weakness is just that. It is boots on the ground scouting, either in that September time frame or in the fall, and not doing enough of it because I'm afraid I'm going to bump deer all over.
Yes.
Literally, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every time,
Yep.
But, I do my spring or, like you said, January, February, that kind of scouting. I'll go in there, do the same thing, figure out where all the rut activity was, or, and the farms I have here in Michigan, I've hunted them quite a bit. So I know I have a general idea of like, okay, where's the community scrapes at? Where's the funnels at? Where's the pinches at that are going to produce? But, like, I think I hang my hat too much on that instead of, like, getting boots on the ground. Like, when it's October, I literally want a hoverboard so I don't have to crunch any leaves. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. Yes.
Everybody would want it. But I just feel like I'm too passive when it comes to that, and I think that's my biggest weakness.
Well, I can tell you it was my biggest weakness back in the early 2000s, and I changed all that completely around 2006, 2007, and I keep building off of that every year. But you'll see on my hunt, on Whitetail Addictions, my show is going to be out sometime in late September. But who in their right mind would go on a 10-day rut hunt and come in on the 8th of November and spend the first day burning up the farm that you plan on hunting for the next 10 days? That's exactly what I did. I showed up on that farm. I walked every inch of it. I bumped deer everywhere. And I tried to keep the wind unit to my advantage, but I didn't care if I jumped. I wanted to jump them.
Sure.
I tore that place up. And then what did I do for the next 4 or 5 days? I tiptoed around because I've seen everything I needed to see. I knew where everything was. Now I knew, okay, I'm going to hunt out of that tree if I get a northwest wind. And then I had this other spot. Well, I'm going to hunt out of this tree if I'm going to have a southeast wind, that kind of deal. And while I would hunt, I would get down and scout just a little bit, tiptoe around. I knew where I could go and couldn't go without being spotted and jumping deer out of these beds. And that's what I did, and that's why I was successful. If I'd have just went in there and hunted my normal rut spots, which this farm has plenty of them, funnels and different edge of doe bedding areas and stuff, maybe I'd have had success. Maybe I wouldn't. I really feel that I wouldn't have, because that's what that buck was used to, and that's what most of the other hunters that hunted that farm did.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the biggest keys, like when you're in the fall, whether it's, let's just call it October, early October or something, what are the biggest keys that you need to remember when you are going in to scout, boots on the ground? Like, what are those things that you need to make sure that you're bulletproof and you might be bumping deer, but you're doing the best you can so you don't bump them, if that makes sense?
Sure. Well, knowing past history, or let's say where you scouted in the spring, where exactly the beds are, and you kind of try to avoid those areas a little bit.
Yep.
And don't let your wind or scent blow in there when you are scouting. And then if you are wanting to jump those deer, you want to be, if you jump them, you want to be able to see them, because you want to be able to see what buck you jumped.
Right.
And I always have my binoculars on my neck. I go in clean. I don't want to go in all nasty and sweaty and just where I left the local restaurant.
Right.
I want to go in clean. And then when I get to those bedding points or suspected areas that I've seen in the spring where they bedded before, I slip in on them. I come in downwind. You like to come in because the deer's going to be looking downwind because they're waiting on predators, because that's how they looped into their bed. If you come in at an angle, you get a better advantage. You get closer to them before they jump up. But I cannot stand to jump a deer out of its bed, and especially an area where I know there's a big buck standing and not be able to see what it is. That drives me nuts. Mm-hmm. But try to get up there and slip up on it as close as you can if you're trying to jump them out. But if you're just doing scouting, field edges and stuff like that, if farmers frequent those areas, then I don't really worry about it too much with scent. I just make a lot of noise and go in there and do whatever.
Yep.
But if I'm going back into the timber, I want to be careful, especially if it's a spot that I'm setting up to hunt that evening. I don't want my wind blowing right up the ridge where they're going to be coming. And, I kind of stay off to the side. I kind of, try to, it's almost like you're hunting, but you're in there scouting, and then throw up a stand if you need to and get out and come back, slip back in that afternoon and get up in the tree.
Yep. How are you on scent? Like, do you always wear like rubber boots, knee highs, or do you not really care about ground scent? Like, what's your thoughts there?
So I went through a thing back in the late 90s and then into the mid to late 2000s to where I was a scent freak. I mean, I fell for every trap that the industry threw out there.
Sure.
I was one of the first ones to have a scent lock suit. I bought it before it was even camouflage. I tried that for a while. I went into using all these scent products and stuff on my body and all this kind of stuff. And I'd have this ritual where it'd take me a half an hour to 40 minutes to get my stuff
Yep.
ready. I used baking soda back in the day. That was before they had a lot of this stuff. And then I transitioned into smoking my clothes. I would smoke my body and smoke my clothes, and I had pretty good success out of that. But then I had a buck wind me. That was 250 yards downwind, and he cut me like he hit a brick wall. And I'm like, this just isn't working. I'm spending too much time doing that. I'm taking chances. So I just quit doing the whole thing. Now I wash my clothes in non-scented soap, not a Hunter's brand soap, just non-scented soap. I take a bath in just a regular Dove non-scented soap. I wash my hair with off-the-shelf Walmart non-scented shampoo. I try to keep my clothes clean. I store them out in totes. When I'm not hunting, and when I do hunt, I come back in. I hang my clothes outside under shelter if it's dew or whatever, from morning, overnight, or if it's going to rain. I keep them aired out. And boot wise, I used to be a big rubber boot guy too, and anymore I'm not at all, because what I found is my feet sweat in the rubber boots, so your feet get cold easier. Then when you walk, it's like blowing a puffer out the top of them. You're pumping all that sin out of the top of your boots if you don't have your pant legs down over top of them. So I went through that whole mess. I like rubber boots because you can wade through creeks, and I like using creeks to access. But heck, I'm wearing a lot of just leather hiking boots that I don't wear to a gas station. I don't wear to around in the house. I keep them in a tote and just wear them when I get out and wear them on grass or whatever. I've just changed into that. I just play the wind. I feel a lot better. I don't take as much time to do all this cautious stuff. I shampoo and take a bath in the same soap all year round, and I feel a lot better. I don't have my skin all dried out, flaking, and just it works 10 times better for me doing that and playing the wind than all this other stuff that I spent time and money on over the years.
Yep. That's crazy to hear you just say that whole thing right there, because I went through the same thing. Like, I had the ozonics, and I'm not saying that didn't work. I felt like I did see a difference with it, but I felt like with that unit, it was very fidgety. It was like, if it was like 12 mile an hour wind, 12 mile an hour, it was like good. But if it was like a little gustier or something like that, it was just like, and I hated the noise. Like, it was loud. I always put it upside down so the fan would blow up. So I got to hear deer before I see them. I have to. It bothers me. Well, I shouldn't say before I see them, but I want to be able to hear first.
Yes.
But kind of the same thing, man. Like, did the scent lock thing. What I do is, I put cedar boughs in my tubs. I've got scent lock totes that are like airtight. I do a layer of cedar boughs in the bottom of my tubs. And I have like athletic fitting camo. I use Cabela's Instinct stuff. And it's more of mountain, like sheep hunting clothes, but I like the form fitting, athletic fitting that makes me feel better. Like, as far as, no restrictions. And I'm on the fence about the boot thing, because yes, I understand what rubber boots do. They don't absorb the odor and the bacteria and everything, but like you said, it's like a puffer. My feet sweat so bad. 2 weeks into a season, my brand new rubber boots are destroyed. They are absolutely horrendous. It doesn't matter if I, put foot odor or whatever it is, antibacterial stuff in it, doesn't matter. They are ruined. And
yes,
I do the same thing. I use Arm & Hammer unscented soap in the shower and in for my clothes. And I hang, like, basically what you said is what I do. And I play the wind. And yes, don't get me wrong, I get winded sometimes, but I feel like I've been more successful in the last 5 years doing that regimen right there. I mean, I don't want to sound egotistical or nothing, but I've put like $7 on the wall in 5 years. And for some reason I'm not saying it's all to my scent regimen, but it could be a coincidence. I don't know. You know what I mean?
I get winded. I get winded a good bit. It's just because deer get downwind of my setup. Right. Now, as long as it's not the one I'm after getting downwind, well, then who cares? Right. I do the best I can. Now, I can say I learned my lesson with the totes. I thought totes were the best thing ever, but if you come back and you're heated up and you take off, let's say, your jacket, and you're heated up in it, and you throw it in your tote and you leave it there for a day, well, that's not good, because that moisture from where you heat it up creates bacteria, and then it starts building off that. So I kind of try to air mine out as much as I can. But the rubber boot thing, I wouldn't even go hunting unless I had rubber boots on, and I've completely switched on that. But you just gotta do what you feel confident in, and if it's going through all that scent regime, then great. But I'd rather spend an hour out in the stand than an hour up getting wore out, getting all my scent stuff together, and just play the wind and do the best you can. Because when I went through all this scent stuff, I was still getting winded.
Yeah.
And I took chances is the bad part. I would cut the wind a little bit and think, well, I can get away with it. And what you end up doing is hurting yourself. You got to set yourself up to where your wind does not hit your target buck's nose, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's like, to me also, like everything on your bow, like all your gear, like let's just take it down to, if you're shooting like vanes or fletching or, feathers or whatever, are those 100% like scent free? Like there's something that you're using on your body. It could be the strap on your release. It could be something. Something's going to absorb some sort of odor. So like you said, if you're all about the hardcore, then do it. But my thing is like, same thing. I'm at the truck for 30 minutes getting on and getting my stuff on. It's like, I don't want to touch this with my hands because I didn't wash my hands, or It's like, man, oh man, like it almost becomes work. And then
completely, like your release. I always wash I shoot throughout summer. I wash my release really well when I get into hunting season. Same way in my truck. I like putting a cloth over top of my seat, because how many Big Macs have I ate sitting in my seat?
Exactly.
My steering wheel, I like taking a rag and wiping it all down with some kind of some kind of non-scented soap of some sort, or even a scent spray or whatever, and then my door handle and stuff. And I don't pump gas in my hunting clothes. One thing I do use, I got a hunting room where I keep all my stuff all year round. I run a little ozonics unit in there. I think ozonics, they use them in hospitals and stuff. It's where all this stuff came from. Yep. I think it's a great idea. I don't use one in a tree because I pack in too much stuff anyways. And it's just another pain in the butt. But like when I go on an out-of-state hunt, and sometimes you can't get to washing your clothes and this and that, I got a scent crusher bag. Mm-hmm. I like throwing my stuff in there every once in a while. Not that it's 100%, killing everything, but I think it works pretty well in that bag, so I use it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. A ScentLock makes one of the same kind of units. It's an Oz unit, and I have an Oz unit in a bag, just like the scent crusher stuff. And I do use that, like you said, like if I'm going on a trip somewhere and, you just shoot it with that O2, or I think it's O2, isn't it? Or turns into O3, or I don't even know the science behind it, but shoot it with that.
Completely, but
shoot it with that, and it's the same kind of stuff.
There's several different manufacturers that make it out there, or you can just get a non-hunting one.
Yeah.
They're cheaper.
Yep.
That kind of deal, and just get you a duffel bag and put it in there. It's the ozonics part that's supposedly killing bacteria because it joins with the different molecules and all that stuff. So, on an out-of-state hunt, you don't have a lot of options.
Right.
Same way going to a laundromat. I got a little cargo trailer that I pull around now when I go out of state, and I got my own little dryer, little portable dryer. I'll hand wash my clothes because, man, going to a laundromat, I don't know. I've smelled numerous washers, and they're just not very good. So
exactly,
I hand wash my clothes and throw them in my own little dryer.
Yep.
Now, so
I actually, I'm building a house right now, and I took an idea from your house.
Did you?
Yeah, I watched the Whitetail Cribs that you're on in your hunting room, and I'm like, you know what? So in my plans, when my wife and I were designing the house, in my basement, we made a room in the basement that is completely surrounded in concrete. It's in the foundation and everything, and that is, I'm finishing it off, but it's going to be a hunting room. It's going to have like all my hunting gear in it, and it's going to have like nice shelves, and I want to build like lockers, like nice lockers in it, and like, I don't know. So that's I kind of took that idea from me. It's not as big as your hunting room, but hey, it'll do just as good for what I need it for, but I did kind of steal that from you.
That's great. Well, we buy all this stuff. I put mine and used to put them in them HS green bags or whatever they had, and I just had them stacked up, whatever. And I just wanted to. It's on the back of my barn. It's just a little bit of a shed, and I built it and put all that stuff in it. And it is great. I love it. And what you're doing, we spend all this money on hunting equipment and stuff. We'll take care of it, and it'll last a long time.
Right. Exactly. I couldn't agree more, man. Well, we're coming up on an hour here, and I think this conversation has been unbelievable. I have more questions, but I think we should save them for another one of these podcasts. Honestly, I want to pick your brain again on some of these, but I guess to let's leave it at, I got a question. I ask this to a lot of guys, but if you have a couple days to hunt in the fall, like what are those days that you're picking? If you have to preset those days before season, you can't look at basically cold fronts or moon or anything like that. Like you have to pick those days. What are those days? Let's call it 3 to 4 days. What days are you picking?
So I guess it would all determine on what I had the previous year and what I scouted and found out in the early spring on a certain buck beds that I want to manipulate and try to hunt on a particular deer. So if I don't know the weather and all this kinds of stuff, I try to avoid hunting the rut as much as I can for a particular deer. So I would probably pick around the probably the 26th, 27th of October.
Okay. I love it.
I mean, love that answer. And if it wasn't that, it would be around the 7th or 8th of November. If I'm just going for a solid buck on a farm that I haven't ever hunted, and that's what it would be. I'd want to go out there in like the 7th, 8th of November to a place that I really hadn't hunted before.
That's awesome. I like it, man. That's great answers. I've talked about it on a couple podcasts here in Michigan. One of my farms, the 19th of October through the 31st, you better have your ass in a seat because you're going to see the biggest deer on the farm. It's just what it is. I've narrowed it down to about 10 to 11 days there, and it has happened the last 4 years in a row. And it's like, but the rut, I'm not here around in the rut, so I don't know what the rut's doing here. But I am here usually 19 through 25, so you can bet your ass that I'm going to be in those stands on that farm in those 5 to 6 day period.
Sure.
But, I killed my Iowa buck on the 7th of November, and then I'd say a bigger portion of my better deer have come in that like first 4 to 5 days of November. But it's just one of those things. I mean, it's just you getting a good funnel, like you said. I wasn't chasing any particular deer. It was just like good rut funnel, and that's how it happened, basically. So
sure,
makes sense.
I've killed several deer out of state on the 1st of November, but it was all because of cold weather that came through.
Yep.
If it's warm at the 1st of November, it kicks me in the butt. But usually on the 7th and 8th, normally even if it is a little bit warm, there's going to be great deer moving. But like this past year, heck, I didn't even hunt the 7th and 8th. I mean, it was 75, 80 degrees.
It was bad. I remember. Yeah. Yep. We were in Ohio. Was I in Ohio? No. Yes, I was. I think I was in Ohio with Casey, and he had shot a buck the day before that. I want to say it was like 4th, 5th, or 6th, somewhere in there. But it was like so crazy. Like, I remember it was warm, and then one day it snowed. We were in the stand. It snowed like crazy. The next day, it's like 70 degrees. And I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Typical Ohio weather.
It's what I say about Michigan, too. It's like you never know when it's going to rain until it rains. It's like, But, well, Heath, I appreciate you coming on doing this, man. I want to record with you here in the next coming weeks, like quick, and get another part out. Because like I said, I've got some questions we didn't even get to that I really want to hit on, but it's late at night right now, and I want to be conscious of your time, and I say we just do another one.
That sounds good. Great. I appreciate you having me on to start with, and it was great talking to you and meeting you the other day, so I'm looking forward to it. We'll do another one.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. All right, there you have it. Another great episode, Heath Cisco. Thank you very much, man, for coming on. Like I told you guys earlier on in this podcast, we are going to do a part 2 because there's a lot we need to cover. So thank you guys very much for everything, all the support, all the downloads. Go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a review. That'd be greatly appreciated. And don't forget, we're going to be right here next week on the Fall Podcast.